All right, top of the morning there, boys. You are joining me for a relatively light volume strict press session. Um, we're not starting the official road to or anything like that, but a 405 strict press sounds pretty cool. So I figured I would start laying down the foundation. Those of you that know the way I train, um, generally like to spend periods of the year focusing on total rep PRs. So like, what's the most total volume I've built at 205? And it needs to be quality volume. You know, we've all gone down that rabbit hole of like, oh, I didn't lock out any of my overheads. I just kind of mindlessly pumped them out to not a good overhead position, but I did way more total reps than I did last time. It's as many quality total reps as I can put in. So we're going into that kind of base building volume phase. Just finished up my time on the wind bike, just staying on top of keeping my kind of conditioning up to par because that matters for strongman. Playing around with a bunch of different setups with the cameras, the mics, mostly because I would like to post more often, right? And anytime we want to change an established habit for the better, one of the stronger things we can do is just find ways to lower our barrier to entry, right? Let's say your calves suck and you really want to build them up. If you've got a garage gym, maybe leave your calf setup like put together. That way you've lowered the barrier of entry. You don't have to assemble it all. It's just one less thing that's off-putting, right? I love my training. I'll put shit together all day, but I still, when there's things that can kind of stay out of the way, I leave them set up as long as it's not going to impact my brother's ability to use it in here and all that. Keep things efficient, things moving fast. And that matters even more for things that you find yourself dragging your feet on, which training isn't for me. Making videos very much is, So finding ways to make this as convenient as possible. I'm trying using an old phone with a whole mic setup, and maybe that's off to the side. So I just need to start and stop it. Maybe that'll lower the barrier to entry. Toss down the phone with the mic, do a single topic video. That'll lower the barrier to entry. Got my computer over there for my program. That way I'm not referencing my program on the same thing that I'm filming with. I don't know. We're going to experiment with it. Part of it is I just hate showing myself lifting weights I perceive to be unimpressive, which is just my own delusional. It's kind of my version of body dysmorphia. I think we're working with 210 for volume on the overhead with no equipment, which most people would think is a respectable overhead press. I'm like, oh, it's fucking shit. There's people I know watch these videos that are gonna be like, I can do that. And that winds me up as a competitive person. But I think actually showing the fact that I do pull back all the way to like 50, 59% to begin a lot of my training cycles for a few week work capacity phase before we get into rigorous hypertrophy training. I feel like whatever. I don't have any secret sauce. People see some of my athletes get really strong and they think we've got some kind of like secret programming. 10-week, 12-week block periodization that I really like leaning into has been around near its modern form since like the 70s. It's not about the secret sauce. It's about doing the known sauce better, right? My athlete Justin is going to be competing at the American Pro coming up pretty soon. And like, he's going to be squatting upper sevens, benching upper fours, and pulling in the low eights. We're kind of getting closer and closer to knocking on the door of a top 10 all-time total at 242. And it's like, yeah, are there small accommodations we make for him as an elite sumo deadlifter as opposed to what I would recommend for other people? Sure, but it's nothing too exotic. It's about doing the things we all know really well. And that's why I don't mind that like a lot of fitness content is repetitive. People are like, I don't really want to hear someone say, take your creatine for the billionth time. Well, are you taking your creatine? Because I find that a lot of the things that made me better are just being reminded to do a better job of the things I already knew rather than always looking for new, novel information. I think that's a big part of the intermediate trap is guys being like, I've already heard that before. Well, you've already heard it before, but you're not doing it very well. So I think that if you keep an open mind and you watch these intermediate videos as an intermediate, you might be like, well, I know about sleep schedule, but this is a different phrasing I haven't heard before. I should redouble my efforts, right? So I've always been one to say, like, people say it's a big problem with fitness that there's only so many videos to make. And I think that's fine, right? Because lifting is a repetitive process. So the information about it is going to be repetitive. And I don't think that's a problem. Maybe it's not great from an entertainment perspective sometimes. And that's up to the creator to kind of chooch that up a little bit to make it fun. But at the same time, like I'm 12 years deep. I've been watching a bajillion, like I've been consuming every ebook, every podcast, every YouTube video I could get my hands on for the last 12 years. It's very rare that I hear something for the first time, but regularly I'm like, I got to redouble my effort here, redouble my effort there. It's about taking these fundamentals and applying them better, and not just having that like conscious, like, here's my intellectual understanding of it, having this emotional understanding of what exactly this assistance work does for you, or what this role in your nutrition does for you, that get the level of buy-in needed for extreme adherence for extreme periods of time, which is kind of necessary for progression within weightlifting. So that is me yapping about a bunch, but I'm trying to make videos more often, gonna play around with the setup and see if that kind of frees us up. Who the fuck knows? Okay. I'd be lying if I said part of the reason I didn't want to make videos more often. I was watching some shit the other day. I was like, being rich seems cool. I'm not going to make much off of coaching anytime soon. Maybe the YouTube will take off if I actually post. All right. To start out here, we'll try the, pardon the heavy breathing. I promise I'm doing a bit of a superset with all of my movement prep stuff. I'm not just winded from the bar, but I look fat enough that I'll have to take that one on the chin. We're gonna try the Sam Sulek style, like have the mic clipped on, talk a little bit between the warm-ups. For now, I'll probably ditch that by the time we get to anything that resembles a work weight, because I do like making videos, but never ever at the cost of the quality of my workouts. My training is the thing that I am the most passionate about in anything I do in life. Nothing that compromises the quality of it is very cool in my book. Big focus here for me is keeping a slightly upward look point, driving the head through. There's different ways to overhead press, whether our goal is to support a jerk, support a push press, or to strict press the most weight possible. We want to row into a slightly more laid back position if our goal is the heaviest strict press possible, whereas that might not be the best way to support a heavy push press because of the lack of similarity in position, blah, blah, blah. But one thing I find is when guys are really interested in improving their strict press, they do a very exaggerated head through where they push their forehead through. If you're not trying to have a very pretty overhead press that looks a certain way because you like it visually, or if it's not to support a jerk, or if it's not to support a push press, leaving your eyes more upward. A lot of guys in the strongman world will say, watch the bar until you lock it and then bring your head through. As long as we can build up the ability in the glutes and the lats to stabilize this slight layback position, you'll find that will drive up your overhead numbers like crazy. My middle ground is keeping my look point upward. Instead of thinking about driving my forehead through the window we're opening with the bar, I drive my chin through it. So the head stays slightly back, but I'm not full on staying watching the bar as some guys do. So I'll show you a couple reps of each. So first we'll do the very exaggerated head through that we might do to support Olympic lifts. So we go here, right, very stacked here. And then as soon as that window opens up, head is going through. Head is going through. Head goes through as early as possible. We're in a slightly less strong position to grind here though. So if our goal is to support the biggest strict press we can, a lot of guys advocate for here, row into this position with the lats, just like the bottom of lat pull down, push the hips forward, flex the glutes, watch the bar until it's locked out. Like that. I guess I'm still kind of doing my motor pattern, so even like more exaggerated might be there, something like that. My happy medium is this. The head starts coming forward early. We're fighting to gain upright posture very early rather than staying behind the weight by driving the chin forward. So here to here. And for me, that's the best of both worlds. All right, finished my pre-workout drink, onto the stuff I drink for my intra. Got a couple water bottles just with some light salt or pink salt. Pink salt's a little bit less salty than regular salt. Light salt has potassium, unlike regular salt. I'm be honest, I just kind of randomly grab what's ever near me in the kitchen, sip on those, a little bit of extra hydration, and then when we get a little bit deeper in the workout, just a Powerade, cheaper than Gatorade, dextrose, fast digesting carb, plus creatine plus salt. Basic premise of intra-workout, if that's something you need, if you're someone who struggles to gain weight, putting some calories during your workout in a window you would not otherwise eat is a bit of a pro tip, but the premise is replace what you lose while you train. What do we lose while we train? Well, we lose water from sweat, we lose salt from sweat, we burn through creatine stores from training, for like phosphocreatine cycle, blah, blah, blah. And then we also burn through carbohydrates, right? Like muscle glycogen. The idea, we could train hard for just a little bit longer if we replace all four of those things while we train. All right. I've never been afraid to do some junk volume. I do a lot of reps on the way up for all of my pressing stuff. Some call it junk volume, some call it grease in the groove. Just depends on your perspective. I have found a lot of utility to not just doing like bare minimum feeder sets, but getting a bit of a pump before I get to my work weights. Takes a little bit to acclimate to, but once you're used to it, I prefer it. Ooh. All right, we got a lot of work to do today, so we are taking a little bit bigger jumps than I usually do on my warm-ups. My rule of thumb is taking 10% on the way up. Bar the first couple of jumps, like when we're way down below 40% of 1RM, I'll make bigger jumps, but as we get closer to 1RM, about 10% of maximum is my normal jump size, just to make sure I am well warmed up. Ooh, one thing I'm saving up for, I'm actually remembering to charge my clients for once. Most of them pay on their own, but I do forget to charge half of them all the time, is I want to get some jerk blocks. Did a session on them the other day. Ooh, not having to catch my push press volume lets me put in like twice as many total dip and drives. My strict press power is pretty good. A lot of it's just refining my dip and drive mechanic, and jerk blocks let me do a lot more of that. So we're gonna save up the big bucks and get the hefty rogue ones and try to find room in this garage, of which there's not much left. We might have to sell off some of the stuff we don't use. All right, this workout is going to be a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be. My shoulders are still quite sore from my push press day, but got in my notes that 88999 would be a good result for my volume on these. So we're gonna do our best to make that happen without really violating our desired RPE. I think it'll happen just fine, but did not expect to be this sore. Pressing 3 days a week right now, I think I'll be able to recover and benefit from it quite well because my nutrition has stayed locked in. I didn't really have any like relax after the 880. My body felt good, like literally a day and a half, 2 days after the pull. It was pretty wrecked the day after, but honestly bounced back really quick. Right back on diet. Beef, rice, and carrots is meal A. Chicken, rice, and pineapple is meal B. And then I have a big old post-workout shake, 6 meals a day, kind of alternating meal A, meal B, sprinkle in some veggies and some dairy. Feeling pretty locked in, to be honest. So I think I'll benefit from all the volume. I don't think it'll be an overreach, but whew, am I sore. Easy. 3,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. Oh. All right, headphones go on, which means microphone goes away. Didn't hate the talking between sets. Definitely could do a whole workout early in the training cycle where I'm not having to dig as deep, especially in these early blocks where it's just as much a conditioning session as it is the early stages of hypertrophy. Some of my assistant stuff, I'm doing interval work. So the proximity to failure isn't like crazy grinder reps to failure. It's just 1 minute rest trying to accumulate a lot of work. You'll see that later on stuff like my rear delt flies. They're not a ton of slowing, which is probably indicative that we're not getting very close to failure because we're early on, we're trying to condition and build work capacity. At least that is what I do for my strongman centric training. But killer session, really can't complain at all. By the end of these strict presses, my shoulders were so pumped. There's a discomfort in my front of my shoulder, but I don't think there's anything going wrong there. It's usually just kind of, I suspect it's the tendon of the long head of my bicep, just getting used to stabilizing these positions for volume. It gets deconditioned at the end of blocks, just needs to recondition. Nothing bad happens. It doesn't really get worse. It just feels like a brutal front delt pump. So yeah, I'm over the moon with the session. Not the most exciting thing, but I could honestly see doing a whole session talking to the mic. I'm not having to get super fired up for these volume accumulation sessions. Definitely wouldn't want to do it when we start getting heavy. You guys have seen some of my deadlift stuff, some of my bench stuff. I definitely bring the adrenaline up quite a bit. Got this whole routine of getting fired up, getting over my kind of self doubts and fears when it comes to attempting really heavy weights that could injure me. Of course, I hate failing, so there's definitely some nerves there. Getting the adrenaline up also does tend to make me a good bit stronger. Every different lifter kind of falls somewhere else. Somewhere on that arousal curve, some people, their best performance comes while dead calm. The second they get fired up, their cues go out the window. Other guys, the more hype they get, the more they lift. The more they can get that adrenaline going, the more kind of strength from their base they can call upon. Their nervous system just ramps up and things go well. Usually, the more technically proficient I am at a lift, the more I benefit from getting hyped. The less technically proficient I am at the lift, the more I need to stay really conscientious of my cues. That was me pausing for a very long time contemplating life because god damn, that pump in my shoulders was hurting. Doing 4 minute rest intervals for the strict press is pretty standard for me in a volume accumulation phase. I think I went 8, 9, 9, 9, 10. So definitely exceeded my minimum for what would be a good workout. Nowhere near all time total rep PR at like 205, 210. Because in the past I've been training overhead for prolonged periods as strict press. Didn't do a ton of it recently, so we're kind of getting back into it. But B, because I also had some blocks of some nasty inflated numbers. Not that these are inflating my numbers, but I did wear a belt, elbow sleeves, wrist wraps, didn't get my head through on the reps, just pumped out like, kind of constant tension reps and did like 5 sets of 15 at like 205 at one point. Definitely not an apples to apples comparison. So after we finished up our main pressing work for the day through the 5 straight sets, we move on to 4 sets of lat pull downs, working on reps where my form starts to break between 8 and 12 reps. I've mentioned a few times now that programming the push press is not that similar to training the bench press, but training the strict overhead press, a lot of the same principles apply and bring me success. So just like when I bench press, I like to do some antagonistic pulling afterward because I find it helps carry over to my ability to tighten up my back and stay tight the way I want. So it yields almost direct carryover. Me and Dennis Freaky D talked about this, and it's one of those things where if it's lagging, bringing your back up will aid your bench press. But if it's not lagging, getting it even stronger won't help. I have no idea how to pose, but here's a little check-in with the physique. Me awkwardly trying to figure out what to do with my arms, but feeling pretty stout. Wish I had taken a video of finishing up my volume phase in the lead up to the 880. I was looking pretty burly, and then when my volume dropped off, I kind of deflated a little bit as per normal. But condition okay. I would like to get a little bit leaner here, hanging out at like 263 morning weight. Would like to lean up, maybe drop some body weight, or maybe just kind of stay there depending on how my body is responding. Taking about 15,000 steps a day, which always drives a bit of body composition change for me. But as I was saying before I had the little pump check going on there, I'd like to do some antagonistic work after my main press. In this case, it makes my gives me better control of my bottommost position. in my strict press, and I find it to be pretty worthwhile. Focusing on kind of arching up at the T-spine rather than the low back to control that chest up position that I look for in my overhead press, which, speaking of, watching over this, kind of reviewing my technique, definitely need to work on my thoracic mobility a little bit. I would like to be able to draw kind of my upper sternum up to the bar a little bit more without having to arch down towards like the lower thoracic and lumbar. Not quite enough movement there, which is kind of the never-ending battle of doing a bunch of heavy squats and deadlifts, and then trying like getting that stiffness, which is a positive adaptation for those lifts, and then trying to restore kind of thoracic extension when it comes time to do bench presses or strict presses. Always got your like homework cut out for you mobility wise. Kind of the same thing with trying to keep a good, nice overhead position while also doing a lot of pressing volume. You got your homework cut out for you. If you keep on top of it, of course, it will pay off. I was doing those overhead cable extensions on the lat pull down. I wasn't quite feeling those the way I would like, so I switched to just a regular going to behind the head easy bar skull crusher variation, which is probably what I'll go with next week. Just wasn't able. I've worked those for like 3 weeks and wasn't able to connect with them after 3 weeks. So I figured tricep extension volume is tricep extension volume. I'll switch to something I could feel a little bit more. Normally, I would do some behind the neck press after those lat pull downs, but my shoulders were so fatigued, I figured I couldn't really do a whole lot productive. I love the behind the neck press for kind of maintaining external rotation that can kind of be lost at the shoulder when you're doing a lot of lat and pec volume. You get bound up. So doing loaded mobility to preserve good overhead positions goes a long way for me. But here I could like, so it's almost like mobility just as much as it is additional pressing volume. But here I figured I couldn't really do much productive work. My mobility has actually been pretty respectable through my shoulders recently, so I didn't need to force it at all. So we ended up opting out of that today. Did the dumbbell rear delt flies because a strong upper back is integral for having a strong overhead position. Doing lots of dumbbell rear delt flies, Powell raises, Lou raises, and Y raises are kind of my big four for keeping those smaller upper back musculature strong. Other than that, I did 3 sets of weighted hangs. A little bit of two birds, one stone activity going on with overhead mobility, while also getting in some endurance work for the grip, which is something that I chronically need to work on as a guy with relatively small hands. Definitely got my work cut out for me there. Other than that, I did some curls at the end that I didn't really care to film. But yeah, that's the general format of this workout. Is we have the grip, which is kind of a floater exercise. Paris has talked about that. I really like the concept where I do, let's say it's 5 sets across the session, just kind of getting them in wherever I can. I can use them as rests between different exercises. So floater grip, overhead press volume, lat pull downs, behind the neck press, dumbbell rear delt flies, and then also some triceps, and then optional biceps. That's kind of the session. So press, pull, press assistance movement, triceps, then upper back, and then optional biceps or forearm work, depending on if I feel like that would help, especially because I'm kind of stuck with a floating front rack right now, doing a little bit of bicep work, a little bit of forearm work to help that floating front rack not feel terrible. Goes a long way, but that's the format for this press one for the week.